Now, when William Saliba came off injured for Arsenal against Liverpool, I was worried as much as many of you probably were as well. However, Cristhian Mosquera came on for his full debut at Arsenal, and I think he slotted in perfectly for the team. Now, in this video, we're going to talk about how he is the perfect player to play that role right now while Saliba is out injured, and just why he is one of the best signings that we have made this summer. So let's get into it. Now, although we are all on a hangover from Arsenal's poor loss against Liverpool, I think that we will leave the negativity for next week and talk about some players that aren't brilliant then, but not now. Now, first of all, I always wanted to make a video about Cristhian Mosquera, and I think with the fact that Saliba looks like he's going to be out for maybe around a month or maybe even a little bit more, Mosquera is going to play, and I think in that Liverpool game, he proved he deserves to be starting and being that #1 backup if Saliba is not in the team, which I think will show brilliantly in this game. Now, I want to show some examples in the Liverpool game about why Mosquera reminds me about Saliba in these positions. Now, this was one of the real positions that we saw early on. I mean, there's a lot of intricate things going on in this midfield. Liverpool had a sitter, they had a guy here not really moving, and they also had another player just kind of pressing really hard. The centre-backs being Hugo Ekitike, the striker. There's a lot going on while they man-to-man marked Woklz and the two wingers very tightly. Now, what I will say with Mosquera is that something I really like about him is that on the ball, this guy is brave. Now, we will get into some of his passing maybe being not as good as you would want it to be and maybe needing to be a little bit better, but ultimately his passing overall is very good, and it is something that will get better and better, but with the confidence he has, I don't worry too much. Now, one of the first things that he is really good at in this game was doing what we like with Saliba, and that is pushing out from the press from the back. Now, what I mean by this is when Hugo Ekitike was making this run or closing down these angles, we often saw Raya pass the ball to Mosquera, while Mosquera and Gabriel obviously went a bit wider like this. Usually, this kind of allowed Calafiori to come into these more central areas, while Timber stayed out wide, kind of close to Mosquera. Usually, that's how it works, but this is obviously a bit disjointed as a 3-2-5 because we've just received the ball from a goal kick. But Mosquera, anyway, would run through the channel, and when this player would come towards him, he wouldn't scaredly just put the ball out to Timber in this situation here. He would run with the ball past the area and past the Ekitike player, and then try and play this ball into the channel to someone like Zubimendi. Now, this was a great example which we show on screen, and when he makes these sort of simple passes, they didn't necessarily always come off. They're weighted a little bit too much as Zubimendi, not in the right area, but ultimately I like the bravery to go for a pass like this inside the channel rather than always passing out wide and having the safe option, and it took Hugo Ekitike out of the game, which I thought was key. And another way that was brilliant was because when he was coming to this wider area from these goal kicks, when you get a little bit of space for him, and Liverpool had some sort of a passive approach where they had their two main players at the front go for these aggressive pressing, but everyone else kind of sat off and waited to see what would happen, we could allow Rice to not only get back and to help into the more central centre-back areas, but it pushed Mosquera out wide into this right half channel. Now, as soon as he's got pace, he uses it, and he's so quick, which we've gone on about multiple times to this team, and covers that area brilliantly. Now, in this situation, he actually goes back a little bit and passes it inside, where it's a bit of a risky pass, but we keep the ball with Zubimendi and then end up rotating it. But I like how, yet again, he is more catered towards central access passing. We see a lot of times for Arsenal players, they really want to get the ball out wide, but in defensive and first phase areas, which I'm not the biggest fan of until it's the second phase and we get into the wingers. But I like how the idea he has of him continually trying to get the ball in midfield to these areas, and I think it is something that we can use a lot in the future. Now, something I want to highlight with his passing, which I think is good, but also not necessarily the best, is like we said, there was a few times as well where Liverpool sat back a bit deeper, and I think his pass selection was really good, but I think how he did the passes could be improved. Now, what I mean by that is that he got into these sort of areas which you see in the defensive area, and instead of always, like we said, passing the ball around, making sure we rotate it into these sort of areas outside the block in the middle, he would go into the block. He would yet again make these runs into these areas and would not care, carrying the ball here, and it would force players to come towards him. I really like this, and I like how a lot of these players had to force to go and get him and kind of cover for him, which was amazing. But what the problem is with Mosquera, I think, is when he gets the ball and there's a few players around him, let's say they're pressing him, and even the defensive areas, I would say, has happened a bit as well, is that when players run at him quickly, he does tend to panic a little bit. Now, sometimes there is a sense of urgency needed, and he needs to clear that ball to get it away, which is fair enough. But there's a few times where you get into really good positions, you're like, what can you do? And he ends up just passing the ball out wide, too far for Calafiori, or passing the ball too far in the centre where players can't get it and defender ends up clearing it, which gets the other team on the counter. So a little bit more effort in terms of weight of pass will be something we look at in the future, but it's definitely the first phase is really good. And I think in terms of breaking down presses from deeper, he is a player that can do that a lot, and I actually think for these games he is maybe set up to do that. It just depends how you want to get the best out of it, but I still think it works quite thoroughly. Now, I've kind of left it to now, but the best thing about him in this game, though, is what we saw is the aggressiveness and the man-to-man 1v1 ability he has. Now, we knew this going into his time at Valencia, that he was this sort of on-the-ball brilliant player, especially physically in these areas. And a lot of the time in this game, I really felt like with Hugo Ekitike, he was able to really outstand him within a tackle, hold it off from him, and win the ball. There's a few times, I think, from passes quite directly into the centre where they want Ekitike maybe to bring the ball down, use him as a backboard, and then pass the ball across, and he did not let that happen. And there's a few quick passes as well that came into these sort of channels, and straight away he is on that challenge right there, being aggressive and winning that ball back. And this happened quite a lot of times. He was super aggressive and made lots of exceptional tackles. And for someone that isn't necessarily seen as this brilliant in the air player, which we spoke about before he signed, I do think his in the air ability has improved a lot. Don't know if this is down to Arsenal's training or Gabriel helping him a lot. His ability a little bit now to look at the ball and the player rather than just the player, which he kind of did a lot at Valencia. And what I mean by that is there's few times, especially with these quite early initial natural balls over, he can clear the ball in his air. Brilliant with Ekitike, all game winning duels, and he's such a physical presence that when he's maybe a little bit late to a cross field ball going towards him, he's so quick that he can transition, change and get there and be physical when he's needed. And I honestly felt like all game he did a really good job at being a backboard and someone that would keep pushing out the defense to help us. Although this did make Gabriel's role, I'd say, a little bit not as great as it could be before, I genuinely think that that is a great player, and a player that can play in both positions would help a lot. Now, one of the other things I wanted to mention as well is that he didn't have to do this a lot in this game because Liverpool didn't necessarily create loads, I'd say, in the box. But in the box, he has showed to be a really good blocker. He reminds me so much of Gabriel sometimes off the ball and even on it, I would say as well. But I do think that when he gets into these defensive areas, he can run out of a defense and he can really get there quickly, yet again using that pace, but he's not always been physically challenging. And what I mean by that is when he goes into these physical challenges for more high up positions, we don't want players to keep doing that in the box. You want them to be calmer and be much more sensible. Now, this is a thing that Arsenal have done with a lot of their players. Calafiori, I would argue, in the box has got a lot better at this in his time at the team. I think Mosquera has already seen big improvements within the box, being very good at trying to keep the ball and being smart with it and not necessarily jumping into a tackle in these areas. And Hincapié as well is a player that will benefit a lot if they're all learning this, which I think is a brilliant thing to have for Mosquera in this team. And overall, I just want to highlight that this guy came in at Anfield away and played the most minutes he's played for Arsenal so far. Even in the pre-season games, he did not play this amount of minutes in a game. And ultimately, I think he was excellent. I think he didn't do anything bad. The goal was nowhere near his fault. He did nothing wrong for that. And ultimately, would have kept a clean sheet if it wasn't for that moment. So I've got to give him a lot of praise. Being a £30 million signing, we've given him a lot of credit over the pre-season games, but this is a different beast. And he deserves so much playing in right centre-back in this game. I didn't really worry about him being on the pitch. He should start the next game. Now, in terms of looking at the stats in this game then, I want to highlight them because 85 minutes he played, which was obviously a lot, but 47 passes out of 51, so accurate. And like we said, I think the 4 passes he messed up were very encouraging central passes, which is really good to see. He made 9 defensive contributions there, 2 out of 4 accurate long balls. He made a pass into the final third as well, and actually won 4 out of his 5 ground duels. Was really good on that grounder. Physical player that we need. But obviously look at the defensive unit. 4 tackles, 2 blocks, 3 clearances, 1 headed clearance, 3 recoveries. Super fast, super aggressive, and is extremely young and experienced. A great player, I think, already that we have signed. And this is the thing, it might not be the most exciting player in the world given the price and the player who we needed, he being another defender, but ultimately I think it's a brilliant sign that the club have made. And actually, if Saliba needs a little bit of time out more and Mosquera can come in for these next future games we've got, I actually don't worry. And I think Mosquera has proven he can step up because he stepped up in the biggest game of our season. Fortunately, it didn't work out for the rest of the team, but I don't think that's anything against Mosquera, where I genuinely think there's such a good base level there, he can easily play right now. And let me know in the comments what you guys think about Mosquera, and you could probably guess the video I'm going to be doing after this next week. Obviously, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next one.